Ask mo muna.
When you talk about making a separate state, Madam Chair, it's not something that's easy. So is solving centuries or decades of historical injustice. That's why in both models, there isn't an automatic, there is no one who can guarantee an automatic and expedient solution. That's why it's not enough for you to say that we're not getting anywhere. Because, Madam Chair, of course, we can see that there is a problem and that it's not easy to solve. But the thing is, at the point at which we already are really certain progress, like for example, multiple stakeholders are already being heard, or for example, even individuals from Imperial Manila are starting to acknowledge the fault of their ancestors, the Bangsamoro people, at the point at which we can still provide a better alternative. Why must you automatically resort to something that is as risky, something that might even harm the very people that you want to protect, which is the Bangsamoro people? Because you can see the Bangsamoro people are poor, they have been victimized, but this debate isn't about just the concept of identity, because it's so abstract. We never consented to be Filipinos. Hello, I didn't consent to be born here. But the point is, consent isn't the ultimate thing. Identity isn't the ultimate thing. This debate is not only about what you think is your identity. This debate is primarily about if, given that we both want to have the Bangsamoro, which model is more likely to guarantee this in this debate. So let's go and question the first thing. Because we think that it's very dangerous for government to be very big in their policy. Because the only thing that they told is that the international body is going to reduce objectivity. Number one, for you to justify that they are the best arbiter, you have to prove to us what exactly is the incentive of the international body to intervene. Why exactly are they doing this? And to what extent are they actually intervening? Because if you look at it, there might be countries within the international community that might have an interest, for example, in getting part of the Philippines. Because if you look at Bangsamoro, it's within the Philippines. That's why the territorial integrity of the Philippines is at stake. Which means, Madam Chair, that we cannot, obviously the Philippines has an interest because we want to make sure that a crucial part of our land is something that's within our control. But furthermore, given that the Philippines or the national government is already the bad guy in this debate, then we say that there is a greater incentive for the Philippines to do its job. That's why the administration has always been fighting, for example, to get a conclusive a solution to this problem, because they understand that they are at fault. That's why we think that in terms of who is the best arbiter, we think that the interest and the political motives of the Philippines is much clearer rather than the vague international body which was conveniently substantiated by deputy. So let's go on further in this debate. I want to talk about, for example, even in the best case scenario, why their side or the idea of secession is something that's harmful, especially for other groups that also have legitimate grievances in light of our identity crisis as the Philippines. Why exactly do states want to avoid secession? Because primarily, when a group of individuals or an entity is able to separate itself from your state, it challenges, for example, the very fabric of your national identity, the very point that you are going to be together. Which means that if just because if it shows, for example, that there is no hope for you to resolve these grievances, then most likely we have to deconstruct, right? Why are there people who are dismissive of the Bangsamoro? It's because they believe that it's much easier to elbow these people because they are considered to be others. They are not of us. Why is this harmful, Madam Chair? It's harmful because if you look at the status quo, right, there are other groups who are also fighting for the rights right now. Which means that more likely you make it easier, for example, you make it more likely, for instance, for the government not be able to resolve directly its fault, but rather you make the rhetoric easier and more palatable for people to think that we shouldn't have to deal with these individuals because it's more palatable for them to have their own state anyway because they're completely different. This is harmful for other groups, like for example the Lumans in Nicaragua who also have their own interests, or for example the Reds in the North who also have their own interests. Which means that if you really want the majority, for example, to be more amenable for you to actually resolve these grievances, you shouldn't encourage the idea that ultimately you are polarized, that there is no way for you to resolve your differences. Because whether we like it or not, Filipino identity is not monolithic. It is very diverse, and we have always constantly challenged and negotiate this. Yes, really.
Would the Bangsamoro secession not allow other minorities more clout because the government has to face the worst possible reality?
I don't think so. Okay, let's go on to the second argument. Let's go and discuss, for example, why on our model we're more likely to get a better government. Because if you talk about federalism, really, the thing is we're actually able to put more power to the people. If her problem is that Imperial Manila is getting more money for skyways, well, in federalism you're more likely to get your budget, which means, Madam Chair, that we actually to an extent are able to address their needs. Or for example, if you look at the nature of the mistrust of the Bangsamoro people, as Kate told you, it is simply because these people feel that their needs are not being met, which is why exactly federalism is a better option. Even if there may be differences in our side, the thing is we're able to ensure, for example, that there is a better platform for these individuals to contest. For example, in federalism, we're still going to ensure that there's going to be elections, right? Or that these people can immediately challenge these kinds of things. The point is, we have to question from government side, what is secession going to look like on their model? How will it happen? Because the problem that we foresee coming from opposition is that it's very likely, for example, that on their model, if you leave it completely alone and you don't allow the national government to intervene, for example, is that these groups might actually monopolize or become clandestine, which means that conflict is more likely to start, especially when it's a separate government. It's very difficult for you to intervene. But moreover, going back, for example, to the idea of territorial integrity. The thing is, as I told you, Bangsamoro is a crucial part of the Philippines. That's why, for example, the reason why you don't want, for example, another state within a state, because it actually raises valid concerns. For example, in terms of security, we can't guarantee that because it is a sovereign state, what kind of leaders they might elect in the future. Like, for example, maybe those leaders might still rekindle, for example, ill feelings towards the Philippines, or worse, they might negotiate with other countries because a sovereign state has foreign power, for example, to get access closer to the Philippines, which might not be towards the Philippines' interest. Maybe, for example, like allowing, for example, other groups that are more harmful for the Philippines. So the point is, these things are actually of legitimate concern. But moreover, you also further sever these individuals from the mother country, which is actually crucial because these individuals, for example, still have a shared experience and shared past with all the other individuals. So for all those reasons, we're proud of them.